land and water use. And what you see in this picture is what they've done in Texas to start building this factory, building this gigantic plant to make environmentally friendly vehicles, right? But look what they did to the environment so that we could make these vehicles. So we're looking at the ways that humans use and in most cases abuse land and water that's available to us. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to mostly present problems the first week. And then the second week, we'll look at some solutions to those problems where we can make improvements. So we're really looking at pros and cons of our usage. Tesla is a great example. The vehicles are amazing, but to make them requires a huge footprint on the environment. Things that are in green are typically considered good by environmentalists, and things that are in red are the problems or the cons to these topics. Okay, so I want to introduce something called the first green revolution. This is actually known as the third agricultural revolution. The first one was when we went from hunters and gatherers to actual growing of crops. So that happened a long time ago, ancient Greeks. The second revolution was in the 1800s, and it's when Europe kind of developed slightly more modern farming techniques. And that's really the big demographic transition that occurs as the society becomes industrial. And the third one, in the United States mostly, happened in the 1950s and 60s. And the Green Revolution refers to the fact that farms are becoming more industrial, using a lot more technology, right? Instead of having a team of oxen pulling a plow behind them, we now have machines to do it. We've come so far now that we're even using drones, computers, able to track and record yields of crops and look for places to improve. Way more efficient using data to farm now. The obvious perk or benefit or solution that the Green Revolution provided was that we avoided that Malthusian situation. Remember where we had so many people but not enough ways to grow food? Well, this was the technology that came along and allowed us to grow food for many, many more people. What are the problems then with the Green Revolution? Well, it's the same stuff that happens with any type of industrialization. Way more fossil fuels were being burned. All of these machines require fossil fuels to produce them and fossil fuels while they're being operated. We also learned to produce herbicides and pesticides to fight weeds and bugs. That increased our yields. We got much more sustainable crops, but we now know that these chemicals are pretty much all of them toxic. And that's the point. We want them to kill stuff, just not us. And so it's one of those bioaccumulation effects where over time these pesticides, herbicides, when we ingest them, can lead to things like cancer. They're carcinogenic, a lot of them. You know, each of those combines costs more than my house. When we talk about some of these farmers, these companies are very wealthy. So on which of the following describes a fundamental characteristic of the Green Revolution in food resources? A, the application of higher levels of organic fertilizers to increase rice production. Now, organic fertilizers, that jumps out at me as it's kind of new age touchy-feely. That's not the Green Revolution. That didn't happen in the 50s and 60s. B, deforestation to provide field crops with increased sunlight. Okay, so we're going to cut down trees so we have more fields and so the trees don't block the sun. It kind of makes sense. We need the space to grow crops, but that sounds weird, right? C, the addition of calorie, fat, and fiber percentage nutrition labels on food packages. That's important and all, but that has nothing to do with the Green Revolution. D, the development of new strains of crops with higher yields. Yes, we're trying to feed more people. So using technology, and we're going to learn about GMOs eventually. That's what they mean by new strains. Genetically modifying, developing crops that we get more food from. That's the right answer. E, the discovery that chlorophyll adds nutritional value to food. No, that's just basic biology. All right, so they wanted D on that answer. A couple of those are tricky though. B makes sense a little bit. A makes a little bit of sense. It's one of those choose the best of the right answers. Questions like that are pretty hard. Hey, check this out. And if you're really into this stuff, farming and industrial farms and all that, there's a Instagram feed. It's called Feed the Planet. He's a National Geographic photographer. This is a beta carotene farm. Where does that stuff come from? And that's what this feed shows you is all the different places around the world that we get this stuff. Look at that, how much land is used. This is in Australia. And beta carotene is basically a food coloring. That's its main role. So we're using vast amounts of land so that we can make food red and orange. Because people won't eat it if it's the wrong color. Did you know that? You go to organic markets and you'll see vegetables that are a little bit damaged or off. They can't sell those in the main grocery stores because people look at them and think they're gross or something's wrong with them. So they have to have just the right color for us to eat it. Humans have gotten so spoiled. If our main goal here is to increase crop yield, that means that we need more space to farm. So one of the first things that happened after the Green Revolution is we cut down all the trees. Deforestation was one of our first environmental problems that we created because we needed to feed a huge population. Look at Indiana on the left. In 1820, everything that's green used to be covered in forest, all of Indianapolis. And we basically wiped the state clean. We cut down the entire northern part of the state so that we could farm it. There's some protected forest now in the South still, Hoosier National. If you go down by Bloomington, all the way down to Holiday World, that's all protected national forest through there. And we've got some parks and stuff in the central and northern part of the state. And actually we're seeing an effort to improve this. We're planting more trees in places we can, but agriculture is such a huge part of our state economy, right? Everybody hears Indiana and they think of corn. Corn, soybeans, tobacco, all that stuff is grown here. All right, so remember what's good about trees. Their main role is that they can absorb pollution out of the air. And the main thing is that they're a carbon sink. So if we cut all these trees down, obviously we're speeding up climate change. So with deforestation, one of the obvious, easiest ways to do this is called clear cutting. When we look at solutions, we'll look at selective removal in forestry, where they'll cut out just the old trees, or they'll cut out just the trees of the high canopy that's blocking the light from all the other trees. But that's not how most places do it, because that's expensive. You got to go in there and say, mark the trees you're going to cut and not damage the other trees while you're cutting. It's not easy to do. So instead, to save money, they just go in and cut it all down. It doesn't matter if the tree's young or old, just cut it out. I thought this picture was interesting. It shows just how clever or devious, if you will, some of these loggers are. Notice how they left the trees along the edges? That's intentional. They did that so that if somebody's driving down the road, they don't notice the destruction behind it, how they have absolutely destroyed that land. They leave a few trees up so oh yeah, we're driving through the middle of a forest. Remember, the roots actually help slow down water erosion. And so when it rains, you're going to have flooding, you're going to have nitrates pouring into the rivers because they're no longer being uptaken by the trees. To worse, they're not leaving anything behind. And look at this one. Doesn't matter if it's flat or not. All right, practice question. Which of the following changes to the hydrologic cycle? Oh, we barely talked about the water cycle back in September. So I thought it would be good to bring that up again. Which of the following changes to the water cycle result if large areas of land experience clear cutting? A, transpiration of water from vegetation will increase. Transpiration is where moisture goes into the air through the leaves. Well, if we're cutting trees down, then that's going to decrease. So it's not A. B, evaporation of water from the soil will increase. Instead of the water going into the trees, the water that is in the soil is going to go into the air. So B seems to make sense. C, runoff from watersheds will decrease. False. If we cut everything down, runoff's going to increase. I just said that. Erosion, runoff, nitrates. D, siltation of local streams. So a whole bunch of little soil particles will clog the stream. This says they won't, it'll decrease. That'd be false. More soil will be pouring into the streams. So the answer has to be choice B. Which of the following is the most likely result from clearing mature forested land and converting it into agricultural to use for cattle grazing? A, there will be a decrease in the amount of runoff. No, there will be an increase of runoff. B, there will be a reduction in the emission of greenhouse gases. No, there will be more CO2 put into the air. No trees to absorb it. C, there will be an increase in diversity and size of primary producers. We're taking primary producers out. We're ruining biodiversity. So it has to be D. There will be a reduction in the uptake of, yes, trees absorb CO2. And if we cut the trees down, they're not absorbing it. That's a reduction.